Thank you for coming. Thank you, Shoshana and Yvonne, for accepting our invitation. We're going to start by a brief introduction of the panelists, and then some questions for you, a little poll, and then we will have a grounding exercise before the poll, and we'll have about 25-30 minutes of questions with the panelists. During that, you can ask questions if there are burning questions, but we will also leave some room at the end for questions. We have planned for breakout rooms. Sometimes people like it. Sometimes there's just such a rich conversation, people decide not to. We're pretty participatory. We'll see how the conversation goes, whether we do breakout rooms or not. And then in the end, of course, we'll wrap up and tell you what to expect, what you'll hear from us. So, Shoshana French, her goal is to cultivate widely successful leadership through the practical power of intuition and authentic communication. She's the founder of Simple Spirit, and as I was checking her bio again, she has led for nearly 20 years. She's a keynote speaker, a coach to a wide variety of people, ranging from NFL leaders to Broadway and television stars to billion-dollar business founders and business professionals. Shoshana generates unpredictable and profound results for leaders who are ready to be free to fulfill the vision they have for their personal and professional lives. So thank you, Shoshana. Great person to be here for this topic. Yvonne Drury-Dodd is a mindful leader and coach who seamlessly merges the realms of operations and strategy with embodiment and with spirituality. For the past 4 years, she's led talent development at General Assembly and has extensive prior experience in nonprofit and consulting. She's a certified coach and a yoga and meditation instructor. So with a unique perspective that resonates with leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives, Yvonne will support your transformative journey toward deeper clarity, unwavering confidence, and the untapped well of innate wisdom within you to fully utilize your intuitive instincts. Who better could we invite than those two amazing people? I myself, I'm the founder of Kichocheo, which means catalyst in Swahili. We do recruiting for mission-oriented organizations, small size. And my motivation to start this discussion was that we found that we have a very thorough, very structured process. Charbel and Edima from my team are attending today. Anna is helping with the tech today. Thank you, Anna. We have a very structured process to alleviate bias. And then recently I've been wondering, is there a time when that structured process, should also invite intuition? And if so, at which stage? So that's part of the things that we're going to explore today. So why don't we ground ourselves, and then I will launch the poll. Yvonne, do you want to make sure we're all present here today? Thank you.
Sure, just a short and simple exercise. So if you are sitting at a chair, or perhaps maybe you're sitting on the floor or at your desk, whatever you're doing, take a comfortable seat. If at a desk, make sure your feet are flat on the floor. Perhaps you want to allow your hands to rest gently in your lap. If you're wanting to receive, you might have your palms up and open. Or if you want to be grounded, maybe your palms are facing down on your lap. Allow your gaze to soften. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or you can have your gaze go towards the floor. Your spine is long, crown of the head is reaching towards the ceiling. And take a deep breath in, breathing through the nose. And exhale, just sigh it out. And again, inhaling through the nose. And exhale, sigh it out. You can continue this deep breath at your own pace. And just take a moment to feel your body settling into the now. Anything you were doing before, let it stay there. And anything you have to do afterwards, just allow it to be there in the future. All right. And I invite you to open your eyes and join us back here in the circle.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yvonne. So let me launch the poll. I think I can, yeah, it's in one of my windows. We don't know who answers what. It's anonymous, so you can say the truth. And finally, I think it's either or. And that's not accurate because what we found is sometimes you can be recruiting, but also looking for your next job. So that's a little, you know, that's a little tweak. Okay. We have 12 answers. I think that's, so right now, I'm going to end the poll because everybody loves to look at results usually. So currently recruiting 31% for people out of you recruiting in the future. So currently our recruiting in the future is 6 people. Currently applying for jobs is 4 people. And they're just curious about the subject. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. That gives us a good idea. So let me start with my first questions. Shoshana, Yvonne, what is intuition? Shoshana, you want to start?
I can start. So how I define definition of intuition, and keep in mind, this is a soundbite. If we had a really long conversation, we'd talk more in depth. But my soundbite definition of intuition is that intuition is a direct way of knowing or understanding something without prior knowledge or experience. That's what intuition is.
Thank you. Yvonne, do you want to give your definition of intuition?
I agree with Shoshana on that. And I would add that sometimes that knowing can show up in our bodies or in our minds in different ways, and conflict with our logic and reasoning that we give so much value to in Western culture.
Great. So thank you. So let's hear from our participant. I've just asked a question in the chat. What does intuition mean for you? And there are not many of us. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and let us know what it means for you. And maybe when do you trust your intuition in life? Does anybody want to tell us? Yes. Somebody say connection to my channel to spirit. To access my internal wisdom, I trust it when it comes from my heart. Jennifer, raise your hand. Yes, you do. Would you like
I think
to?
Adima actually raised her hand.
Ah, sorry. Yeah, because I only see the most recent one. So yeah, Edima and then Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So I would say it's like a gut feeling, and you may not really have all the dots connected, but something within you just pushes you that this is wrong or this is right or this is how you should go. So it's more like something intuitive. Yeah.
Is there Edima? Is there an example you can think of? I don't want to put on the spotlight, but you know, is there a particular example when it's like, oh yes, I trust my intuition and I was right, or it gave me information I would not have had otherwise?
I may not have a specific example, but it works when I meet someone for the first time and something just tells me this person is genuine, this person is honest, and someone I can relate with and work with. So And a lot of times it's right. Even when every other thing might make me want to, fight that. You're just meeting a stranger, you shouldn't trust, you shouldn't. And then other times I have situations where, this person doesn't have any reason yet to say they are not good people, but everything in me says, no, don't go further, just, so, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So Jennifer and then Natalie.
Yeah, it's really similar to what Adima was saying. I think someone else said it's a connection to their channel spirit. I think it shows up for me. It's almost like this nexus of like physical and emotional and spiritual memory that is trying to guide me through things that I have experienced through a situation that I don't, but my body or my spirit remembers something about this moment that is going to give me the wisdom to move through it in a way that logic or reason or present data might not.
Thank you, Natalie. And then we'll go back to our speakers.
Intuition for me, or my understanding of it, is that we all have intuition. And sometimes we have covered it over through what people have told us, or just thinking that it's all about science and physical world. But it comes from my heart. It's my internal wisdom. It's the true guidance. I can think that I should be doing these things, but my heart might be telling me, no, you really need to be doing this. And it's kind of this battle of really trusting the internal guidance and following that versus what all the other external messages are coming at us, which can veer us off from our true path.
Yes, thank you. Shoshana.
I just want to add one more piece. I've trained 10,000 people how to use their intuition. So I've been doing this for like 28 years. And one piece that I think is useful or helpful to remember is that when you're using your intuition, it's very different than logic. Logic is a really good tool for fixing a problem or for avoiding making a mistake. So your car stops working, you don't need your intuition, you need to take it to a mechanic who has the information you don't, so they can fix your car. However, if your car stops all of a sudden suddenly on the side of the road and you're not sure if you're safe or not, that's actually a good time to use intuition, because intuition looks beyond what it is that you know. That's the whole purpose of intuition. Like, I think it was Natalie talking about that sense, or Jennifer also, that sense of that sort of inner wisdom that may go against what your logic is telling you, because intuition is looking at something other than solving a problem or avoiding making a mistake. So I just want to add that one piece. Intuitive decision making really allows for seeing into something, having insight into something that your logic purely does not. So I just wanted to add that piece. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'll give a chance to Josh, and then we'll move back to our panelists.
All right, thank you. So for me, I think to me it's more relative to music and harmonics. Intuition is a feeling, a vibe, it's something that I can tune into. But logic tells you that chords are structured a certain way and they have to sound like this. But feelings and intuition guide a different harmony that sometimes the being in tune with somebody or something or someplace is different than, do I think I should be here right now? Is this where I'm supposed to be? And all the logic paths get you there. Sometimes it just feels right, and that's how I correlate it.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything else, Yvonne? Okay. So, since our discussion is also around recruiting, right? The trick is, what is the difference between intuition and bias, and how do we define bias? So the definition of bias that we found, that Charbel found, and it's bias is a preconceived opinion or preference that can influence your perception and decision making. And it's sometimes based on repeated former experiences and sometimes not. Does anybody else want to offer another definition of bias? No, we're good with that. Yvonne?
I would say sometimes when I think about biases, I also think about like preferences, especially when it comes to hiring. Yeah.
So you completely prepared me for my question to you. So I'm going to present an example, right, of a situation that we face pretty often in hiring. And Charbel helped me set up that situation, right? So if we face the following situation, how do we know whether this is intuition we can trust or bias that we should challenge? One of our clients is a hiring manager and tells us, I couldn't help but feel an instant connection with the candidate during our conversation, right? And Edima talked about a good feeling when you meet someone. We discovered a shared passion for sustainability and environmental conservation. It was as if our thoughts aligned, and I intuitively sensed that this candidate would bring a unique perspective and dedication to our sustainability initiatives. What do you do with that information as someone in a position to approach?
So when it comes to those kinds of things, especially in a hiring situation, I have the side where it's like, these are the skills, these are the core competencies, this is what I am looking for overall, or like what we have determined is needed in order for someone to do well in this role. And then the things that this example is mentioning are the nuances and the in-between around like, ooh, this person's really fun to talk to. So I have like a parking lot or like another side where it's like, oh, that's something that's a nice to have, but it's not necessarily a part of like, this is what is absolutely necessary in order for this person to function well in this job or on this team. And so I think it's important to think about it in that way, because it's like, all of those things are talking about, you just made a new friend at that point.
Florence, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, everyone can probably see the chat from John. Thank you, Evan. Like when hiring, you don't really know how someone works. So are you deciding on their skills or who they are, or yes, all of the above? Yeah, indeed. Shoshana, do you want to add to what Evan and John contributed?
So just to be clear, I've sat in with clients and helped them for interviewing, but I myself have not interviewed people. I'm not in recruiting. That's not my wheelhouse. So just to understand my expertise, but I have sat with clients who had two candidates that both looked great on paper. They both interviewed well. They, they went through a process of multiple interviews as they were hiring for a C-suite level position. And sitting in the room, you could see people's bias, right? But from Yvonne's perspective, which is preferences, you could see the preferences that people had, right? Like who they liked more or who they enjoyed being around more. And what I noticed intuitively, which is why they had me in the room, was that it is often the thing beyond what you can tell by looking at someone, having a conversation with them, reading their CV. There's something, the beyond thing, that like uncertain thing, what different people have expressed as their intuition, that really affected whether or not they would be a good fit for the position, not immediately, but long-term. And that was what I advised them to pay attention to, was not who is an immediate good fit. Like, I think we even talked about it when we were kind of creating this panel, was like, if you hire someone that fits in the culture, then you'll have yet another person who's like everyone else. But if you hire someone who's a little bit different than the culture or the people who are in your organization, it allows for new growth, new perspective like that. And so that was the intuitive kind of moment in this, in this meeting was hire the person who's great for long term. They may or may not seem like the person who is immediately perfect, but over long term. And that's what I had them check into. And they hired, the person who felt like the best fit for long term. That's the best way I can describe it.
And do you want to add anything? I see two raised hands, Charbel. Do you want to add something? Oh, Charbel. Go ahead, Charbel.
Yeah, so when it comes from my perspective as a recruiter, we do face a lot of times when we are interviewing applicants, we might face this common passion, things that we do have passion or interest for, and this common passion between us and the applicants. But definitely we shouldn't be influenced by this common interest. However, it's more like preferable and recommended to take this common interest as a starting point to start the discussion with the applicant, get to know more about their skills, about their qualifications, and how would they be like of a fit for this role that they are applying for, and take like the conversation from there. So it could be something like an advantage just to start the conversation and take it from there without being influenced by this common interest between the hiring manager and the applicant.
Thank you. Edima?
So I think it gets a little tricky with the hiring process. When two candidates do extremely well and you're struggling with the choice of choosing one of them, then it's easy to use your intuition to decide who goes compared with the two of them. But when a candidate is not necessarily the very top candidate, but has certain skills that convinces you that they would do well and grow in the role, you may not have all the necessary things that are logical to be able to convince every other person on the panel that this is the right candidate on the job. And then at that point, you're at a crossroad. So maybe this would trigger more discussion how to move forward with such a situation.
And I really like that you brought that up, Edima. I've been there. And with all the processes of in our hiring process of having other people's input and, like everybody's perspective, I have been in a place of having a deep sense of, I see this person, I see their potential, I know they can do this job, right? And for that particular job, it came down to, do they have the things that we actually need to perform the functions of the job? And are the things that we are kind of, saying like, oh, well, this isn't that great or that isn't that snazzy, are those things that can actually just be taught and people learn on the job anyway? And so I feel like our biases also come in that way too, because if you're already like, a lot of people have this thing where they're like, you need to be able to hit the ground running. You need to be top A plus 110% already. And it's like, if that's the case, then you'll never have like growth or diversity on your team or anything like that. And so I think starting from that point, like having that intentionality from the beginning of, we want a variety of experiences and growth points and even potential, like that has to be there. And then that also helps make the decision easier, because then you can say, in the way that I created my teams in the past, it was like, I want people to add value and not necessarily fit. And I know that that's something that's like trendy right now, that people are talking about, culture add, not fit. And Jen, go ahead.
Wait, hold on. Josh was there before.
So sorry.
Yeah,
I just got excited.
Josh, and then Jennifer. But I do want to add, Ivan. I think one of the way we help our clients discussing the culture fit versus, if there is such thing as versus culture add, is to always go back to your core values, right? Culture can be hazy, can be tricky and can include a lot of biases, whereas core values, it's slightly easier to screen people for core values and to connect with people around core values, as long as you do have core values. Now if you're the value that then you can align, then that person can be a culture fit or a culture add, but it's not a huge risk, right? Yeah, so Josh and then Jen.
Actually, I think y'all have covered that quite well. My just side note on that is I found in our process sometimes, or in my process, that I have to remove my personal bias from who I think is right and just like align with the values, with the skill set, with like I've got to take me out because in my mind, who I want to work with in my head, it doesn't always gel with who's in front of you, who the opportunity is there for.
Thanks, Josh. That's a great contribution. Yeah, Jennifer.
I love what Josh said about like recusal. And sometimes you're like, I'm gonna be a problem here. And so if I can't, I gotta fix my face differently, or I gotta say, you know what, I'm gonna refrain from giving some input on this. And it really kind of ties into, I think one thing that's important to say out loud, and to kind of to give a name to, is that a lot of things that we're talking about, right, is bias mitigation. So when you're hearing in recruiting, you hear like, we want bias mitigation, we want to mitigate bias in the process. And I think mitigation and elimination are two different things. Like in mitigation, and I don't know the exact definition of mitigation, but like we're trying to reduce the severity of something. We're trying to reduce like the cost or the seriousness of something being present. We're mitigating it, but we're not eliminating it. And so I think sometimes we talk about bias mitigation, right? And we're saying like we're mitigating it because it's not possible to eliminate it. But I think when you get into like really consultative, culturally aware, highly sensitive, highly nuanced recruiting and hiring that is doing a lot of the work on the back end before you even get in front of a candidate. Like, I don't know who said, like, you can't identify for value add if you haven't identified your values. But it's important to say when we're doing that, we are mitigating the severity of bias, but we don't want to eliminate it, because for conversations like intuition, sometimes your intuition and the way that people are practicing it, your intuition is telling you something based on your lived experience, which is its own knowledge validation source. That logic may not necessarily be being able to tell you. And it's calling up into your conscious memory something that might not be right there. And so I think eliminating all bias isn't really important. I think not being afraid of naming biases can be really useful or helpful, because that affinity bias that you're feeling in situation A, that might be problematic at like a resume stage, right? Like I have an affinity bias for this person because they went to the same school as me, can be really problematic. Potentially though, a same affinity bias, if mitigated, right, by like processes and data gathering and all of some of the more whatever things, can be really helpful in an interview stage that says, I might advocate for my affinity bias, might help me to advocate and bring a different perspective of a person who also has an invisible disability. And so potentially maybe I can offer a counter narrative for, why is this person, job hopping? Well, maybe they had to follow benefits to make sure that they're getting the care that they need, right? And so I think that am I making sense, right? Okay.
Yes, to go back to the values, so, little plug for Chair, we definitely always start by making sure that our client understands their core values. And sometimes this is an opportunity for us to facilitate a brief, like refresh. Okay, what are your core values? Is everybody on the team aligned with those values? Are you sure these are still your core values? Yeah. Any more questions or so Jennifer, you talked about, we talk about alleviating, mitigating bias at the resume stage, for example. So I think what in this conversation, what's interesting too, what I wanted to try to unearth is, are there some stages where it's more important than others to listen to your intuition? And I think you just got to that. I think as a resume said, at a very early stage, you really have to be very careful to look at, the core values, the qualifications, the skills, and to not overinterpret anything. Like you talked about job hopping. I mean, you didn't call it job hopping, but some of our clients call it job hopping and are concerned. And we always push back with our clients, like, well, we don't know what's behind. If that person we think has the skills and everything, let's invite them and let's just ask them, like, why? Like, not necessarily like this, but like, let's try to understand what's behind. Because it might actually be something that is very beneficial. If you're a very entrepreneurial organization, would you really, really want to, bar somebody early on because they're so-called job hopping? Maybe that's the best candidate. And also nowadays, we have a lot of clients who tell us, oh, I want that person to stay 3 to 5 years. First of all, you cannot know, okay? You're not gonna know. And that person themselves might not know, right? We found that people are very good at lying to themselves. And they also just like, you don't know what life is going to throw at you. So maybe you hire somebody who's been very stable all of their life and you think, oh, they're going to be there forever. And then, there's going to be a change of leadership in your organization. And after 2 years, that person goes, or that person, moves somewhere else or has a family situation. So you never really know. And so we really try to help our clients, for example, reframe that, like, that whole questions of job hopping or long term. We try to help them reframe and listen to other kinds of information that could help them make the decision. Does that make sense? Yeah, Shoshana.
So I just wanted to add one thing, because we're talking about stages where intuition is useful. And I just want to be clear that intuition is not predictive. So it could sound like fortune telling or prediction, but actually it's insight. So, which is a little bit different. It's being able to understand something or someone beyond what logic will give you. And so where I have found with my clients, the stage that intuition is really useful in hiring, recruiting is the stage right before you start the process to recruit, meaning that intuition is most useful in relationship. So if you have a leadership team and you're just about to start the process of recruiting, and what you don't see is that the team is not aligned in the hiring, what they're hiring for, what the skill set they're looking for, the value add, right? All of those things. What I have found, I imagine you probably find this too, Florence, is sometimes you step into a meeting with this leadership team to start the process of recruiting, and you notice that the leadership team is not actually aligned with what they're looking for. And I would say intuition in that particular instance is super useful, having everybody on the same page for what they're looking for. And I have both been there then helping the team be in communication, but also aligned, and also at the end when they have great candidates and can't decide between. So those are the two places I've really seen intuition used effectively.
And Shoshana, I think that really ties in well with Dee's question. How do you handle situations where bias and intuition is different for recruiters and interviewers working together? Like if one says no and one says yes, because I feel like it's like, did you do that initial alignment phase? And also that's a fantastic opportunity to come together again. And that's where people can unpack and mitigate biases and preferences and really process and talk things through. And I think Jen had talked about that, like intuition being collectively investigated and things like that.
I love that, the collectively investigative. The only other thing I'll say there, because Dee, that's such a great question, which is that we make the assumption that everybody's asking the same question. Intuition isn't a mysterious thing, it's a tool. And so when you ask the question, it actually, your intuition responds. So that's really, if everybody's not asking the same question, that's when you're going to have two people saying two different things. So doing that pre-work to have everybody on the same page means everybody's asking the same question, and then intuition, more aligned.
Thank you. So it's 20 minutes to. We have a choice whether we continue. We're a smallish group. We have a choice whether we continue this discussion here, whether you want to go into breakout rooms. Breakout rooms, anybody, or we're good continuing this discussion here. Good staying here? Yes? Yes?
Thumbs up if yes.
Thumbs up is yes. Thumbs up in your reaction if yes. Okay, because we know that sometimes people really like to have an opportunity to connect. So we will ask you actually after the event if you're okay sharing your email with other people. We can do that too. We'll ask you, and you can say yes or no. Okay, so let's stay in the main room. Yeah, so that intuition discussion, and when this is something we face that, so we have a process at Kitotil, we try to have, processes embedded and to try to have early, I think Jennifer called that huddles, and we have comprehensive intentional debrief to dive into the deltas. And yes, at Kitotil, we have at the beginning, a series of questions. And our experience, honestly, is like, and I don't know, Charbel, Edima, I'd love to hear from you and from other recruiters as well. Our experience is that we feel we're almost all covered, and almost invariably, no matter how thorough we've been, and no matter how much we might have called on our intuition, although Shoshana, I think next time I'm going to listen to my intuition a little bit more at that stage. But no matter how much we think we've covered all of everything, oftentimes, like after the screener or after the hiring manager interview, and especially, unfortunately, after the panel interviews, if you bring in different colleagues, no matter how prepared we think we are, and no matter how much we've had discussions with the colleagues, there's almost always misaligned or slight misalignment between the leadership or the hiring manager and the colleagues. And I don't know whether that's true for other people. And that is part of the reason why, we're hosting this. Like, I want to make sure that we improve that. I think it's also time bound. Like, people don't accept that genuinely thorough hiring is going to take time. And so they don't always dedicate the time to share among everyone who's going to be a part of the process what exactly is expected of the process. And if you're the hiring manager of leadership and you hire for a COO, and then you have colleagues who are going to be part of a panel, right? Colleagues and supervisees, your vision of what is needed in that position is going to be slightly different. And so how do you reconcile those visions, right, at a stage that allows you to make a decision that is good for the organization?
Florence, I feel like you answered it right there when you said that people are not giving themselves enough time or making the space for how long this process takes. And so there's that piece of like educating the client or like educating the people involved, like, this is what must be done. This is how it is done, rather than, and I have totally been here, and we often just get caught up and swept up in their own, like, I needed this person yesterday feeling, but it's just like, we take the time now, or you're paying for this in lots of thousands of dollars later. Like, so I think that that's important. And also, there are differences in those levels of leadership, and there are going to be just some things that not everybody understands. But I think taking the time to do all of that alignment and really understand the vision from the beginning might help that tremendously.
Correct. Yeah, Josh said, does a sound process allow you freedom to trust your intuition? I would think that would be, I was wondering whether that would be the conclusion of this panel. And then Jennifer says, hire hard, manage easy. So true. A few months back, I actually felt very brave to start the hashtag, I haven't followed it, like slow hiring, right? Like this, there's nothing more controversial than going slow when you hire. Of course, it's our idea is not to be slow, but to be, intentional. And so I think we do have to push back. Of course, we still, you still have to be fast enough, but not at the cost of sharing and making sure that everybody is aligned.
And I also want to comment on that, Florence. You bring up a really important point that has been threaded throughout this entire conversation. Like, why is it so controversial to do things slowly? Why is intuition in this conversation so controversial as well? A lot of that has to do with, at every single step and at every single moment, we are pushing up against a hyper masculine or hyper solar situation that's just been very much like fast, hard, like thinking doesn't matter, reflection doesn't matter. Like those things that we associate with more feminine or lunar qualities are not in the normal vernacular and behaviors of workplace culture. And so every single thing that we're doing, just even from employee well-being or psychological safety or anything when it comes to hiring and doing things well, it is so difficult in these spaces because we are pushing up against that. And that's something that's really, really big. And I just want to name that and acknowledge that. And it just takes a lot of people and a lot of small, tiny actions at each stage, at each part of the process in order for that to slowly get back to a place of, or not even get back to, but evolve to a place of balance.
Yes, on the other hand, even, I mean, I could totally agree, but on the other hand, we also are, at least until recently, we as in a recruiting position, we're very much against the deadline of candidates kept on. If everybody around you is in that culture, right, then candidates kept on, you can lose very good candidates to other organizations because they make rash decisions. So it's a challenge, right, Jennifer?
So I'm going to try to keep this brief because this is one of the hills that I die on in hiring manager consultation. And even in talking about like coaching recruiters and like working with hiring managers and like managing processes and these kinds of things. I think something that happens is, and it might have been today, I was just having a conversation about this thing of the train is moving so fast that things are getting unstable. So let's just start uncoupling train cars, and because we gotta slow this thing down. So fly stuff off. And the necessity, and I think Yvonne really named this, of saying we have to operationalize behaviors of reason. We have to operationalize and bake into the process and formally articulate behaviors of pause and of reflection of process. And then we have to value them as parts of the hard process that happens. Because something that happens all the time is someone says, and I just gave a presentation on this yesterday, and we're talking about, someone says, well, I think that we should just move a little bit quicker. So like, let's just cut out first rounds and let's just move straight to onsite. And the temptation there is to be like, we want to have somebody in seat by the 3rd because whatever the because is, it's, what is it, Jill? And I'm not talking about any particular person that I'm working with right now, but like, it's July 13th. This hasn't been moving a certain way. This person is on vacation. They're not going to be able to come back. So you know what, we're just going to have to move this to onsite. And I think something that really needs to happen in those places is like, you have to metabolize anything, and metabolize and digestion is such an important part of like all human function, all reason, all business processes, and for anything to go well. Like, and I don't mean to get like, I'm not a doctor, so forgive me, don't at me if this example is terrible, but like, if you're not metabolizing and digesting your food, terrible things are going to happen to your body. If you are not metabolizing and digesting not only the information that you're gathering, but the way that you're synthesizing that information or the experience that you're having, terrible things are going to happen on your team. And so something that we work with a lot with hiring managers is very clearly setting an expectation at the beginning of, there are parts in this process that are built in for data collection, for parts of the hire. It's not fluff and it can't be overlooked. And if we have to, we monetize that for a hiring manager to be able to say, I understand that for whatever reason, and there's a whole different lecture to be had about why, what's your why, and is your why real? Is your deadline real? Does it need to be real? But if we don't do these things like sit down, listen to the experiences, get into the details of the data, vocalize and vet and interrogate and collectively investigate the intuition of the people who were brought in for their expertise and their opinions. And we just keep moving past that. However much you paid for this person, if it takes 8 months for that person to be fully onboarded into productivity, right? And then for them to start like being revenue generating because you can put them on assignments, they've cleared up time for somebody who can be doing more strategic work or whatever it happens to be. But they get to 6 months, then you have to go back and pay $12,000 or whatever it costs in salary hours and resources for this. And then you're going to wind up have to put this person back. The time that you're saving is costing you more time and tens of thousands of dollars because we didn't want to take 1 week or an extra hour to pause. It's not logical. And we say that it is, and we say that it makes sense, but it doesn't. And I think a lot of times part of our responsibility as hiring partners is to be that consultative reason in the room to say, there's a consequence to reckless speed. Not efficiency or like deliberation, but reckless speed 100% of the time has a cost that you do not want to pay because you didn't want to be in this search in the first place. You're trying to rush through it. So you want to be back here in 6 months? That don't even make sense.
Jen, I cannot nod my head enough. In some of the comments, like around like Florence, you were talking about, well, some people, will leave or go to another place if you don't act soon enough. And Dee is talking about there are candidates that have multiple offers at the same time. And so to Josh's point about the process and to what Jen is saying as well about that intention, I have had friends in these processes. I have experienced processes that were so deliberate and intentional. They had all their stuff together from the beginning. So they could say, here's how this is going to go. We're going to do this at this stage. It'll take us 2 weeks. And then we'll get back to you at this point and we'll let you know X, Y, and Z. That and kind of intentionality and thoughtfulness will let candidates know ahead of time exactly what to expect at every single moment so they can plan and they can say, yes, I want to be a part of this, or no, I don't want to be a part of this. And I think that's what's so important for hiring managers and clients to understand is this fear of I'm going to lose people if I don't X, Y, Z. It's like you're going to lose the people that are not aligned for what you are doing. Absolutely. If you want candidates that want to be rushed, that don't really care and all that stuff, they will happily engage in your train wreck of a process, right? But other candidates will say, I'm sorry, they don't have it together. This makes me uncomfortable. This is reflective of the organization, and I'm not going to be a part of this.
That's all right. Yeah, transparency. And Jennifer, we spoke about that in one of the discussions we had earlier on another of our panels. Yeah, transparency in the process is very important, and predictability. We try to do that to the extent possible. Sometimes, you realize especially since we work with small teams, you realize, well, we need to add one more step to the process because we don't have full information, or we need some more complementary information. But usually we are very open with the candidates, and we really try to help our clients be on schedule, and if we're not, explain what's going on and make sure that we reflect what the steps are with our candidates. Yeah. Okay, anything to add? We are 6 minutes from the end. Thank you. It's been very rich discussion. So trust our intuition. Yes, one of the things that I appreciated when I prepared for this discussion with Shoshana, but something that really sticks with me is the idea that intuition is one more piece of data, right? Because we all are so, what's rational, what's not rational, but intuition is another part of information and data that is worth taking into consideration. We spoke about maybe at the beginning to make sure that the team is aligned and to make sure that you all understand what you're getting yourselves into. We spoke about the end, maybe once the candidates have gone through a structured process to alleviate bias. Anything to add as parting words? We will send everybody the recording and a reference to a training by Aparna Ray about equity and intuition, which is a very interesting way of exploring some of those issues. Shoshana, some closing words.
I just want to say that intuition is a skill, just like communication is a skill, and it can be trained. So lots of people think it's like this thing, and that if you trust it and listen to it, it will get better. That's true. However, it's like anything else. Everybody has a bicep muscle, but if you don't lift weights, your bicep doesn't get stronger. So first of all, you have to understand what exercises actually work for your bicep. Then you have to do the exercises, and then you have to repeat them. It's not a one and done kind of thing. It's like an everyday thing, right? So there are exercises, there are ways to build your strength and skill in your intuition. And that is, in fact, what I train people to do. And it's really, really possible. But just in parting words, I always say, be pals with your intuition. Pause, like pause your body, stop what you're doing, unplug, get present, ask questions, pay attention to the questions you're asking your intuition, listen. And to listen, you have to understand how your intuition comes in. Yvonne was talking a little bit about that in the beginning. And then the last is strengthen, which means rinse and repeat. Pause, ask, listen, strengthen. If you do that and really understand and practice, you will gain skill in how to use your intuition. It is natural. It'll become a natural data point, as Florence is saying.
Thank you. Yvonne, some passing words.
I love everything that Shoshana just said, because that's exactly where my mind was going. And like, we have to be able to train ourselves to do these things. One point I might add is just, a lot of this whole conversation has been talking about being intentional and slowing down. And in order to even get to the place of training our intuition and the things that Shoshana just mentioned, do you know what's happening in your body at any given time? Have you slowed down enough to even be aware of what's going on, what you're thinking, what you're processing, what is just an unregulated nervous system moment, or what is actually your intuition, right? Like, so I think that is so important. And so things, that we all know can support this, but just meditation, journaling, exercising, anything that helps you with that mind and body connection, period, can start you on that path where you can actually understand and assess the things that Shoshana is referring to.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. We will share the recording. We will also share the contact information about Shoshana and Yvonne and ourselves. And if you have any training or things that you want to share with us to continue the conversation, please feel free. Also, our next discussion will be in the fall, so watch out for our invites. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful end of your day. Bye.
You want to stop the recording? I didn't know if we were still.
Yes.